Another extra time loss for the Edmonton Oilers, and the pressure continues to mount on general manager Ken Holland to make a trade. 3 weeks ago, when I said the Oilers needed to do something and general manager Ken Holland potentially on the hot seat, that was crazy talk. Now we find ourselves less than 2 weeks away from the trade deadline, and it is absolutely apparent the Edmonton Oilers need to do something to shake things up. Granted, the flu bug and a couple of key injuries have done nothing to help the Edmonton Oilers, but that said, they got to figure this out somehow, some way. Friends, as we get set for today's update video, this is Dolynny TV. I'm Tyson, glad to have you along for another edition of Edmonton Oilers coverage here on the channel. And obviously a 6-5 loss in overtime to the Colorado Avalanche today spurs today's discussion instead of a post-game. But before we get there, housekeeping notes. If you're new to the channel, I'd love to have you stick around and stay up to date for everything for the trade deadline and into the NHL playoffs for the Edmonton Oilers. If you'd be so kind to hit that subscribe button on Dolynny TV, I would really appreciate that. Friends, where do we find ourselves? Well, things have gone quiet, or so they might seem, on the Erik Karlsson front. That's number one. And what it seems to be today and coming into this weekend is the update is maybe not that there's an update, or more so that there is a hang-up. That seems to be the situation for the Oilers, and everything seems to tend towards the hang-up is on the Sharks' end, trying to figure out exactly what they're willing to give Carlson up for and what they're exactly trying to ask for in return, right? Kind of two in the same, but the real difficult thing here is for the Sharks, they're at a situation where they're at a win-lose-lose situation with Erik Karlsson, right? He's played his way into finally being tradable. They're a rebuilding kind of basement team this year and kind of trending in that direction for the next few years, and obviously trying to get the best point, and he's really the only reason that they're able to get points at this point of the season. So when you've got a potential Norris Trophy frontrunner on your team that you're trying to deal and try to get great value out of after being what I think a lot of people would have deemed untradeable just last year, is the situation kind of worsens for the Sharks, but at the same rate they're selling him at his absolute peak value that he's ever had with the San Jose Sharks. So you kind of couple that together twice over, and it's like, well, is this going to be a loss for the Sharks, or could this be a win? And I assumed that the hang-up being on the Sharks' end would be Mike Grier, the general manager of the San Jose Sharks, having to ask himself, quite simply, is it a question of he wants to go there, we can trade him for something good, I need to get as many assets back as possible and not screw us over as much as possible? Or is it more so, hey, you know what, let's just wait to see the desperation mount on Edmonton, and especially right now, this is a perfect situation for Mike Grier to be sitting in going into Family Day tomorrow and the week starting on Tuesday up here in Canada, simply because for the San Jose Sharks, you've got a partner that's trying to upgrade for a playoff run, and now suddenly things are sputtering. The Oilers have lost 3 straight in extra time, and it all comes down to if they could just hold that lead, if they could just get that one more goal, right? And what does a guy like Erik Karlsson hopefully do for you? Both of those things, because again, friends, especially when you're talking about having to give up Tyson Barrie to make an Erik Karlsson trade, you tell me that Erik Karlsson is not an upgrade on Tyson Barrie's defense. And secondary, for all of those that are just absolutely done with Darnell Nurse, you tell me that Erik Karlsson is not an upgrade on Darnell Nurse's defense, because honestly, if everyone's going to say Darnell Nurse is the worst defenseman in the NHL, then you tell me that you are not upgrading when you trade for a guy like Erik Karlsson, because simply if Darnell's the worst, hey, Erik Karlsson could be the second worst, and he's still better than Darnell Nurse. So we'd be upgrading defensively as well as getting an absolute dynamite puck mover and offensive showstopper on the back end in Erik Karlsson, friends. So that's the Erik Karlsson news. That's kind of what we're sitting here figuring out right now for the Oilers. Is it looks like he is just hung up in trade talks because of San Jose, not because the Oilers aren't willing to give up. It's just San Jose trying to squeeze the market for every bit of assets they possibly can get out of a team like the Edmonton Oilers. The secondary update, and of course this is kind of the double-headed monster we've been running up with the past week, is Erik Karlsson and Patrick Kane. And of course today on the situation here for the Leafs-Hawks game is Elliot Friedman and Anthony Stewart were on the panel with David Amber after the first or second period of play between the Hawks and Leafs, and it was a question of where does Patrick Kane end up, and Elliot Friedman said, well, probably Vegas, but what about Edmonton? And that's kind of becoming the theme here this past week, is now with Jonathan Toews fully off the trade market and more than likely on the LTIR the rest of the year, is for some reason this Patrick Kane to the Edmonton Oilers thing has really picked up here in the past week. And I will tell you one thing that makes this interesting to me is, of course, we heard news today that Evander Kane missed today's Oilers game against the Colorado Avalanche with an upper body injury, and if it is indeed his arm there, I don't know why you wouldn't just shelf him on the LTIR until playoffs and use that extra cap to assume the contracts of Patrick Kane and a guy like Erik Karlsson. There's a ton of ways the Oilers can make things happen here, and especially if they get some good news out of Evander Kane. And here's the thing, why am I suggesting such a crazy thing, especially when we don't know the severity of Evander Kane's injury or if it is indeed an upper body injury? Simply because if you can somehow find a way to add $5 million of cap space for this Oilers team into the trade deadline and all the rest of the season, is it benefits you to go out there and make your acquisition, and then you get better in the playoffs, kind of the same thing Evander Kane did for us last year. But what I'm kind of looking at here, and the silly part about this, is obviously you have to find some lame brain ways to make things work. And again, right, that Evander Kane going on the LTIR after mysteriously missing a game with an upper body injury against the Colorado Avalanche and putting us 11-6 again, A, allows an emergency recall for now, but then B, is that not just the lamest thing that keeps continuing to happen? Ken Holland keeps magically finding cap space by manipulating players onto LTIR, throwing guys down in the minors that we need on the NHL roster but don't have room for due to the salary cap, right? It's kind of one of those things. The Oilers can sit here and look at it all season and just kind of keep kicking the can down the road. And if you can somehow, as Ken Holland, find a way to get there to the playoffs, that's all that matters. And a guy like Patrick Kane coming in that scenario, or even just coming in regularly, would be a huge boost. But again, this week it seems, right, we shifted from Erik Karlsson, Erik Karlsson, Erik Karlsson to now Patrick Kane, Patrick Kane, Patrick Kane, and insider after insider, Elliot Friedman, Chris Johns, everybody's out there, Frank Saravelli out there talking about Patrick Kane potentially to the Edmonton Oilers. And this is where, right, again, I'm not sitting here saying it's going to happen, but where there's smoke, there's fire, and now all of a sudden there's another lame outcome for the Edmonton Oilers in terms of putting Evander Kane potentially on LTIR. If he is indeed seriously injured again, I don't know, was it just a maneuver to get another emergency call-up while there's somebody else sick in the locker room? I don't know. Again, this flu thing that's running through the Oilers locker room is absolutely devastating this team. And you tell me if we would have been able to go 12-6 or 11-7, not that we have 7 D-men, but 12-6 today, how much that could have changed things for our Edmonton Oilers after playing shorthanded the day before on the Friday. I guess things could have maybe worked out a bit different, especially with a guy of Evander Kane's talents in the lineup. This game against the Colorado Avalanche really didn't have any bite, and I think Kane could have brought that, but obviously being injured, that is not the scenario. So again, Patrick Kane seeming to be heating up, and Erik Karlsson seems to be hung up here for the Edmonton Oilers in terms of the big 2 trade targets for us at or before the NHL trade deadline. So that's kind of where we sit going into tomorrow, Family Day, and I assume we don't see anything tonight unless we see somehow another emergency recall. But if we were to see another emergency recall, I'm pretty sure the Oilers would just place Evander Kane on the LTIR, get us into the post-trade deadline scenario, and see where we go from there, because that just seems to make sense. If we have guys banged up and you're going to make some big acquisitions anyway, I don't know why you wouldn't just shelf a guy for as short term but as long as possible to give yourself a way to maneuver the cap as best as possible. That seems to be Holland's tactic this year, so that's why I suggest it. But friends, that's really all I've got for you. So if you're new to the channel and you want to stick around. Hey, this was a good discussion in my opinion. Obviously not too much heavy hitting news, but again, if you'd be so kind to hit that subscribe button here on Dolynny TV, I would really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. We're into Family Day Monday tomorrow. I'm a little bit busy during the afternoon, so we'll probably hear from me later in the evening and early in the morning tomorrow. I'm Tyson, Dolynny TV, up on, out of here.